Hello and a very warm welcome to Black Gold, which is coming to you on Business Television Africa. My name is Emmanuel Obwaji Rafi. Remember, every Thursday brings to you Black Gold, where we discuss oil and gas, as well as educating the public on the various activities within the offshore oil and gas industry in Ghana. Well, today, Black Gold brings us to Dzorwulu, specifically on the premises of offshore shipbrokers, where I'm joined by the country manager of the company here. She's in the person of Mrs. Gertrude Adwoa Ohene Essiem. She's going to tell us about what ship brokerage is all about and what she does within the oil and gas industry. Hello, good day and welcome to Black Gold.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel.
Now tell us, who is a shipbroker?
A shipbroker is basically an intermediary between somebody we call a charterer, that's somebody who's looking for a ship for a specific purpose, and a ship owner, somebody who owns the ship that can do the particular service that the charterer is looking for. And we have different types of shipbrokers. It can be that the charterer wants the ship to use for a specific time and therefore would not want to buy it outright.
Okay.
We'll have people who also want to buy a ship, and so the shipbroker is intermediating between the person who wants to buy the ship and then the person who has the ship to sell. So we can have a sale and purchase broker, and a broker who is dealing with dry cargo chartering, that's cargoes that we are putting the containers and stuff to transport. And also we can have an offshore shipbroker like us. We deal specifically with offshore vessels. And so we can have different types of brokers who are specialized in different markets of vessel needs, and then they apply that specific rule in relation to.
Which gives me the impression that you virtually deal with the offshore oil and gas industry.
Yes, for our type of brokerage, we only deal with the offshore oil and gas industry because that's our specialty. So we've specialized in the chartering and sale and purchase of offshore support vessels.
Now, how do you become accredited as a shipbroker in Ghana?
To become a shipbroker, just like to become an accountant. We have an institute in London which trains shipbrokers. So we have the Institute of Chartered Shipbrokers located in London, and currently I'm the only female fellow in West Africa, which is
that's impressive.
So I'm a chartered shipbroker and a fellow of the institute. And so to qualify to call yourself as a shipbroker, you need to be trained, and I happen to have both the practical and the theoretical training.
Does it give you any edge over others? I mean,
yes, because if you are somebody who is trained in a field, you have the theoretical knowledge, and therefore your analytical ability to understand something is much way above somebody who's just gone through. If you ask people who've gone through only practical training without any theoretical training, they are used to doing something in a particular way because that's what they've been trained to do. But if you understand the theory, you understand the implications of what you're doing, and therefore it's a painstaking exercise. So you understand the legal liabilities of the person you are chartering the vessel to, you understand the legal liabilities of the owner who's chartering the vessel, you understand the specific requirements of what is needed, and therefore you are able to abide by your principal's instructions to the letter. And that minimizes liabilities for both the owner and the charterer.
You must be a very big woman. I mean, because earlier on, when I heard of a ship captain, for instance, I realized that that person is really a well-to-do person, very, very important person. Now, how relevant is ship brokerage in the oil and gas industry?
Very, very relevant. As I speak, before the oil and gas, we found oil. We didn't have any brokerage houses in Ghana. And I wrote my institute exam way back in 2002. And so it was just, the certificate was just there. But with the emergence of the oil, immediately we have so many brokerage houses coming to Ghana. That tells you that the offshore oil and gas industry is directly linked to the work of a broker. Because it's the broker who, the charterer sends the needs to the broker. The broker identifies owners who have vessels to match with that need. And go through the requirements to select a vessel that will be fit the exact requirement of the owner. So it's not every vessel that can do any work.
When you say the charterer, identifies the need, are you talking about the oil companies, for instance?
Yes, we have
Tullow,
the oil company. We have the international oil companies like
Partners.
Shell, BP.
Oh, okay.
We have the independent oil companies like Tullow, Cosmos. We have the subsea companies like Technip, Subsea 7, and all the others. So all these people, both contractors and subcontractors, have vessel needs depending on the contractual agreements they have in place. We have independent oil companies we have the state-owned companies like GNPC. We have Petrobras in Brazil. All these companies will need vessels for the operations. Usually they don't own the vessels. They charter them on what we call a time charter basis, depending on their needs. We have what we call the spot market and what we call the term market. The spot market is about the charterer is working today, the oil company is working today and needs a vessel by tomorrow morning.
Wow, that early.
So it means 24/7 the broker is at work. And if you go to somewhere like the North Sea, where the spot market is well intense, the charterer cannot know every owner who has a vessel immediately when I need it tomorrow. So who will fill in that gap? It means the broker is constantly keeping a data of vessels around. Because if you're looking for a vessel, you're looking, and it's so immediate, you're looking at exactly what is at your doorstep. What can I have today for the person to use if the thing is, this morning you get a call and the vessel is supposed to go on charter by 12 noon. It means that you need a vessel immediately in your vicinity, and if you can't get, it means you move somewhere closer. Because the farther away the vessel is, the higher the cost, because the charterer will pay something we call mobilization fee and demobilization fee to take the vessel back. That's money needed to mobilize the vessel in and out of the country needed. So you need to look at your immediate surroundings to see what is there, because it will offer the charterer a cheaper option. And in somewhere like the North Sea, the requirements are frequent and they are instantaneous. So a broker is the one who's able to study the market well and be able, and then the industry is based on supply and demand. If you need a vessel right now and only one person has it, it means the price is going to go up. If a lot of people have it, it means that it's a competitive thing, and so it also has pricing. So the owner is looking at getting pricing advice from the broker, and also because they know that you know the charterer's needs, you can advise them on specific things they can do.
Do you actually deal with the brokerage not only in Ghana but as well as other countries?
Yes, Offshore Shipbrokers Ghana is dealing for all vessel fixtures around West Africa particularly, and also the entire Africa market.
Now tell us, how are you able to identify a charterer's need for a vessel offshore?
Usually the charterers will send out a tender if it is a long-term project. If it's a short-term, it can just be by a phone call that they need this vessel at this particular moment. The vessel requirements are tied to what we call the drilling program of the oil company. So if the oil company is going to do 3 wells in the next 6 months, we know that depending on the type of rig they're using, the type of vessels they will also need. If you're using something like a semi-submersible rig, you know that they will need anchor handling tags to be able to help the rig in positioning itself at a drilling position. If they are using a drill ship, you know they will use more platform supply vessels. And so it's all about the drilling program. It's about the type of rig the company is also using. Vessel needs are also influenced by political conditions. So for instance, in the year that we had elections, vessel requirements went down because every operator is looking at their safety, they are looking at the security of the investment, and they are also looking at how well they can do the operations in a safe environment. So the environmental issues have effect, political issues have effect. Oil prices going up has an effect, going down has an effect, and also fiscal regimes of countries also have an effect. If your taxation and regulations are very strict, you have less people getting very attracted to the environment. So it depends on legislation, it depends on politics, it depends on the drilling campaign, it depends on what the charterer needs.
So it gives the impression that your work or your activity is quite volatile. I mean, it can change from time to time based on the dynamics of
because if you take, for instance, the border dispute between Ivory Coast and Ghana, if things will turn around, obviously all the charters will move from here to somewhere else that's peace, there's clear guidelines as to how they can do their work. So it depends on stability of the country, and that's why you realize that most companies are coming to Ghana these days because one, there's peace, there's free environment to operate business as opposed to some other countries, so they'll prefer to come here. And I tell you, most vessel owners want to come to Ghana to fix their vessels, but the requirements are not that huge at the moment, and so they are relaxing to see what will happen and will come to Ghana. And so it all depends on the environment.
Now, what kind of program are you tied to in Ghana? Do you do heavy tankers, oil tankers? Do you do normal vessels that's, you know, cart, what do you call it, logistic support for the companies offshore?
Yeah,
what exactly do you do?
We're doing the platform supply vessels that's used for cargo runs. We're doing the anchor handlers that are used for anchoring of vessels. We're also doing the security vessels for other regions in West Africa. Somewhere like Nigeria and some of the fields, you need security vessels to aid them. We do what we call the fast supply and intervention vessels. We also do, I mean, any offshore vessel at all, that's our specialty. So it depends on what the charterers need is. If it gets to a point, there are times that they need a subsea vessel to do subsea work. They will need a survey vessel to do survey work because everything starts from survey before other things follow. And so there is specific requirements that come to us. Provided it's an offshore vessel, we are there to help.
So even if it's a tanker, you can?
Yes, if it's a tanker, we can.
Have you had any offer for tankers?
We do have a lot of offers for tankers, but most of them have turned out not to be, because what we do is to do background checks of people who send us requirements. And so, for instance, you know that in a sale transaction, depending on the term of sale, it's either the seller or the buyer who is required to provide a transportation. If you are selling on what we call FOB basis, that's free on board, it means that it is the person who is buying who needs to provide the vessel. Okay, so depending on the terms of sale, if the person who is selling on CIF basis, it means they have to procure the transport. So it depends on the terms of sale that shows who is supposed to provide the transportation. So if we get the requirement and it's a genuine one, we do go out.
Do you bear some of the liabilities in case of, for instance, you know, a spill, or for instance any kind of accident or anything that happens along the line? Do you bear liability as a ship broker?
No, a broker is more or less an agent. So it means he's an intermediary between the owner who has the vessel and the person who's looking for the vessel. So the contract is not signed by the broker. That's signed between the two contracting parties. That's the owner and the oil company. So what you need to do is that oil and gas depends heavily on health, safety and environmental issues. So you, the broker, as an intermediary, what you need to do is to understand the requirements that the vessel has. That one, it has to have good certification. Vessels must comply with SOLAS regulation, that's safety of life at sea. Now they've added security, so security of life at sea regulations, which is international convention that vessels must comply with. You need to make sure that vessels comply with MARPOL, which is Oil Pollution Regulations Convention. You need to make sure that vessels comply with STCW, that's Safety, Training, Certification and Watchkeeping of Seafarers. You need to make sure that the vessel complies with what we call the ISM code, that's International Safety Management Systems code, and so many other things that vessels need to comply with. So it means that their documentation, and Ghana, the Shipping Act incorporates most of these regulations. And so we have to make sure that vessels that come here have those safety mandates put in place so that every charterer would want to record a zero tolerance for oil spill or environmental hazards, because of course it comes with a cost and it gives you a bad image if you have these kind of indent incidents in your books. So everybody will want to record a zero tolerance for such HSE mishaps. And it is important that the vessels that we get them will comply with these international charters regulation as well as the local legislation of the country. Every vessel also flies a flag. So we have what we call the flag state regulations. So they will have to go through the flag state regulations. The charters usually add their own regulations as well that the vessels must comply to. So when you receive an invitation to tender document, it specifies all of these that the charterer is looking out for in the vessel. And therefore the owner must be able to comply with these things before the vessel is even fixed. And for charterers to ensure that some of them will insist on a pre-inspection before the vessel is fixed. Others will want the vessel to be delivered and a survey done. But in all of these, it means that they are looking at safety first, because at sea, it's safety first. You are in a very harsh environment where somebody will say that you are torn between the devil and the deep sea. So what you wouldn't want to happen to you is something that you cannot get out of. And so these requirements, we make sure that
does our waters, our waters around here in the West African, the Gulf of Guinea, do they pose any inhibitions to your activities?
Yes. If you take the Gulf of Guinea, one of the major issues that are affecting operations is the issue of piracy. We've all heard about piracy. That's the illegal detention or depredation of actions against a ship. And these happen in most waters. If you take our waters, there are times that the media blow things out. We can have petty thievery that will be blown to be piracy. But one of them is that security of the vessels. And so if a lot of these activities are taking place in the waters, you are classified as high risk environment. And therefore, the higher the risk, it means that your insurance premiums are also going to go up. And it means once insurance premiums are going to go up, and if you are in waters such as our neighboring countries where there's all these acts of piracy on the SMBC, it means that you require security vessels. It means vessels might have to move in convoys, and it means having security on board vessels. And so these increase the operating cost of the vessel. And the owner is going to take all of that into consideration if he wants to quote a rate. So that more you are able to ensure that these things don't happen, the better for the country and the better for the operators to have that kind of peace to be able to do the work.
What about, we have what we call force majeure or an act of nature. Do they occur frequently on offshore, and how do they also come into play?
Acts of God is something that nobody predicts.
You can't help.
Yeah, you can have it. But every vessel operating at sea is in a harsh environment, especially the fact that drilling actually takes place on the continental shelf, which is the deepest part of the sea. So obviously, it is a harsh environment. And you can have normal perils of the sea. But act of God is an act of God. That is determined by God. So it can happen. But we haven't seen anything extremely above the blues like what we have in Japan and other places where they have volcanic eruptions, they have all these other things. We are not experiencing them here, so we thank God for that. So it means things are moving on pretty well. And so our environments have so far been, in quotes, incident-free. With the major incident we've recorded so far has been the helicopter crash.
That happened then.
That happened a few months ago. So I think
yes, that's quite good. But I also wanted to find out, as a local company, we will be talking about legislation, we'll be talking about the various laws that surround the industry. But how are you accepted by, or how do these companies open up to you your services? How do they embrace you into their fold?
It's a little difficult because the oil and gas industry is more or less based on tradition. And so oil majors are used to people they use already. If the person is using the person in Aberdeen, he's using the person in the US, he's using the person somewhere else. He prefers to use the same subcontractor for similar jobs. But as offshore shipbrokers is not an entirely local company. We are local in terms of ownership, but we have foreign ownerships as well, who give us the practical training and requisite technology transfer we need to be able to put ourselves in a position to assist in these matters. So that kind of training has helped us to build an image that gives us an international recognition. And because of that, we're using local expertise backed by foreign expertise to expedite our work. And when you are in that position, it means you have a fair advantage because you are tapping in the experts to train you to go through the process, to be able to reach a level where you can be on your own. And so everybody in this office is going through the Institute of Chartered Shipbrokers exams, which will give you the theoretical knowledge to be able to, if you get a tender and you read it and you see words in it, you understand exactly what it means. You understand the owner or charterer's insurance requirements. You understand the scope of work. You understand the exact vessel that is needed. So if somebody says they need a platform supply vessel of 5,000 deadweight, you're not going to give them something less than that because you understand the requirements and therefore you act accordingly. So that's the first step. And that gives us that edge because the name is already known in the industry. And so we're able to progress with that kind of name. The most important thing will be for companies that have set up here, who have invested in the country, to be able to benefit from that investment by getting the contractual obligations from the oil majors to be able to enhance their work. Because a job is also a daily learning process. The more requirements you get, the more you learn from what you get. Because each of them will present their own challenges that you would have to deal with.
Do you do a lot of your work on the computer, on desktop, by networking, or you actually travel around the world to actually get to contact some of these vessel companies?
Most of the job is done through the internet. So our number one enemy is when there's no light and there's no internet.
Like this morning.
Like this morning, so that you have to depend on generators. Sometimes it's not too powerful to power everything here, but we have a very good generator downstairs, so it helps. But if our internet is down, our service provider cannot give us internet. That's a major challenge because we need our internet and our phones to be able to work effectively and efficiently. So at Offshore Shipbrokers, we sign on to what we call our IT policy because most of the things are confidential and they're sent to you by mail. So you append your signature to the IT policy when you're not supposed to disseminate information to people who don't need it. And also be able to have that confidentiality of either the owner. If you are getting requirements from most owners, one, you're not supposed to disclose the price that the other owner told you to the other owner. So these are things that we ensure that we don't do. And there's no favoritism in our part when we're doing our work. It means that an owner, all the requirements we get, we send them the way it has to be to the charterer for them to decide on which vessel they want to use. And that is something that we put in place. So without internet, we can do our work. And that is one, because we keep a database of all vessels in the world, and especially for our office, for those operating in Africa, we have a database of all of them. So if I get a requirement, I only go to the database, look at the requirement, look at the required vessel, and which one fits very well. And then send the requirements to those owners who have vessels that will meet up with such requirements. If it is not, we can't get it available in Africa. It means we have to go outside Africa to the North Sea.
And that's expensive.
Yeah, the mobilization, and that's what I spoke about earlier, that it means it will require mobilization. Even if it's somewhere else outside Ghana, if it's in Nigeria, you would have to mobilize it here
But that's much closer.
That's much closer, yeah. So the distance, and also the laws in a particular, for instance, in Nigeria, the inward and outward clearance of a vessel is much higher. So if you are bringing a vessel from Nigeria, it's of a high cost to a charterer, as opposed to if you're getting it from somewhere like Togo or Ivory Coast, which is a little closer, okay, and who have clearance issues at a barest minimum. So it all depends on these factors. Okay.
Well, so when we come back, we'll be talking about legislation, we'll be talking about the challenges and the stakeholders that you deal with along your line, apart from the oil companies, I mean national stakeholders, state stakeholders. Well, so if you've just joined us, this is Black Gold coming to you from Jolu, specifically on the premises of Offshore Shipbrokers. And my guest today is Mrs. Gertrude Adwoa Ohene Essien. We'll be right back after this break. Don't go away. Thanks for staying and welcome back to Black Gold. My guest is Mrs. Gertrude Essien, beg your pardon, Mrs. Gertrude Adwoa Ohene Essien of Offshore Shipbrokers. Madam, let's now talk about the regulations. What are the laws that you work with or that regulate your activities in Ghana?
Because we deal directly with offshore support vessels, our major regulator is the Petroleum Commission, which is tasked with regulating, monitoring, and supervising all companies who want to deal with offshore business. And so they are our major regulator. And that brings us directly also under the local content regulations, LI 2204, which mandates that if a Ghanaian company is registered in Ghana, and there is business in the offshore support vessel, provided they have the capability and ability to do it, they should be considered first before any other company. And it also talks about if you are a non-Ghanaian company, how you can get into the industry. If it's for exploration, 5% equity to a Ghanaian. If it is for goods and services, then 10% equity for a Ghanaian. So we fall under those conditions.
Specific conditions.
Specific. Because we charter vessels in country, we ourselves need to understand the local regulations in relation to the operations. You have to understand the fiscal regulations, because if any owner wants to fix a vessel through you, they will ask you, what are the implications? Are we going to pay withholding tax? Are we going to pay VAT? Are we going to pay, in Nigeria, for instance, they have cabotage dues, they have NCD dues, and so many. So you have to understand the totality of regulations in your field. For instance, in Ghana, we have the Shipping Act 645, which regulates that local trade within Ghana's maritime jurisdiction should be reserved for Ghanaian vessels. Okay, and therefore, if you have a foreign vessel that wants to operate in Ghana, because as we know, there are just a few people who have vessels in Ghana currently.
Do Ghanaians actually own vessels?
Yes, we have companies that own vessels. We want Ghanaians to own
bigger
platform
vessels.
supply vessels. We want Ghanaians to own anchor handling tag supplies, those that can do the big jobs. So, but currently we don't have such owners. So what happens is that the local companies go into a joint venture with foreign companies to be able to provide these services. So in order to get this to work, it means if it's a foreign vessel, they require a permit from the Ghana Maritime Authority, because local trade is reserved for local companies. So we are practicing what we call indirect cabotage. And Ghana,
what is cabotage?
Cabotage is reserving local trade within Ghana Maritime Jurisdiction to Ghanaian vessels. And because not many owners have such vessels, it means we have to fall on the outside partnership with to be able to get those vessels in here to operate. So to fulfill the permit requirement, it means you will have to partner with a local company. Because one, to be able to provide any offshore service, you have to have a Petroleum Commission permit. You have to, if you are a vessel agent, it means you have to have a Ghana Maritime Authority permit as well to operate. And a foreign owner coming in will not be able to have all those things. So it means you have to partner with a local company to be able to provide that service. And with the enforcement of the LI 2204, it's going to be mandatory to have at least 10% equity share if you're a foreign company. So that gives locals an opportunity. And in vessel ownership, you don't necessarily from day one, but you can say you're buying it outright if you don't have the capacity. We have so many terms. You can bareboat a vessel from an owner who originally owns it and then operate it like an owner, what we call the disponent owner, over a period, and be paying off the owner over time. That's in areas where you need finance to be able to buy these vessels. So again, it's a challenge for a local company to buy a modern platform supply vessels that's going to cost you over $30 million. And again, an anchor handling tag supply vessel is even much higher, let alone a rig. I mean, a daily rate for a rig can range up to about $500,000 upwards a day. That's a daily rate. And so it depends on these conditions for locals. So we have
would you broker a rig for a company to do exploration?
If it is. We have our London office have the requisite requirements, and they have studied the rig market and they know the rig fixtures. So something like that will fall on them, on their expertise to be able to charter the rig.
What are your charges?
We know, usually with such big contracts, the oil majors go directly to the rig owners to do that kind of thing. But if it comes that the regulation is well enforced and you need to use a local company to do it, then they wouldn't have a choice. It means they will have to go through local company. And in that way, we have the capacity to do it because we have the expertise that are training us to be able to acquire all the necessary level of knowledge to be able to operate in the industry. So if it comes to that, we will be able to do it. So
would you venture
offshore shipbrokers was in existence before, we could have sold the GMPC drill ship for them because we do sale and purchase of vessels.
You were not in existence by then.
No, we came into existence, I think, 2010. The company was established in 2010, and I joined in 2011. So that was when.
Right after. Would you venture into a place like Sierra Leone or Liberia, which is also, I mean, coming up within the industry?
We do all the West African countries. We recently chartered vessels to move a rig from Equatorial Guinea to Angola. Okay. So we do across board from across the West Africa bloc, because as I said, we have a database of all vessels operating in the region. So we know if we have the requirement in Togo, we can advise on the nearest or closest if you don't have one immediately in Togo. In Nigeria, Nigeria has a big offshore market. So most vessels are as well in Nigeria. Again, Equatorial Guinea, we have Gabon, we have Angola, we have areas coming up like Mozambique, Tanzania, all these areas, Kenya, Congo, all these areas are areas that we look at and operate. So you just need to study the market and know.
Do you have competitors here, local competitors here in Ghana, which are quite threatening to your activity?
We do have a
really?
lot of competitors.
Not foreign, local?
Yeah, local, yes.
Like your type, I mean, like having a foreign affiliation.
Currently, Offshore Shipbrokers is the one that has 3 in-house brokers that are Ghanaians that are working in the offshore market. There's another local guy I know, and another company also that have their CEO as a local person. But as to an in-house broker, we come top when it comes to that.
What about the downstream sector? Do you also broker, I mean, vessels to bring along perhaps for the BDCs, for instance, I mean, refined crude downstream?
Currently, our focus is offshore support vessels. But we usually do get requirements for tankers, which is not very much of our specialty. But what we do is to refer to other people who have specialty in that to help fix those vessels. So that's something that we are also training ourselves into to be able to charter. But I mean, if you study a charter party and you study types of vessels, they run in a similar manner. So whether it's a general cargo vessel, whether it's a tanker, whether it's an offshore vessel, provided you're able to study the charter party and where the vessels are, you know the owners who have them. It's an easy job to do because you'll be able to relate to somebody who has a tanker and somebody who needs a tanker and the specific requirements they have. So we have done tanker chartering as well. It's something that we have studied. And if the market improves as well, that's something that we're looking at incorporating into our mainstream business.
Now coming back to the regulations, I mean, how receptive, I mean, are some of these, institutions towards your activities? I mean, like Petroleum Commission, once again, I'm talking about specific issues like charges, fees, I mean, that are charged occasionally for like your activity rates. How competitive are they and how high do you think?
The Petroleum Commission, as I said, issued permits in the industry. And once you're going to renew your permit, you need to pay for the permit if it is granted. And the permit is calculated, how much you pay is calculated based on your turnover and whether you are a local company or you are a foreign company. And in Ghana, when we say local company, we mean a Ghanaian company is a company that has 51% share. Okay, so once you have 51% shares, and I think sometimes you also look at management, like us, we have 100% management. We are 75% local. And so so we are qualified to be a local, we are a local company. So in that case, it means our permit rates are based on the local charges as well as our turnover. So it's not a static thing. If this year you get more business and your turnover goes high, it means the permit rate will go higher. If you don't get much business, then there's a minimum rate that you pay. And that will be...
Are they not too high?
Well, that's for the commission to decide. Most people have complained, especially the foreign companies, that the rates are extremely high for them because it doesn't guarantee you a business. You renew your permit yearly, but that doesn't guarantee you a business from
automatic business.
An automatic business. So if somebody like a foreign company is paying so much in a year to get a permit, that will not require them that permit can give them a business within the year we are talking about. And some other companies are also doing other things apart from offshore activity. So if you look at the accounts, obviously the account is going to portray a high turnover, which might not necessarily be coming from petroleum activities. Because if we are fixing vessels from other places in West Africa, for instance, it's not directly a Ghana business, because we haven't had business from a Ghanaian oil company. But that can shoot up our turnover. But we are paying, you pay the permit based on your turnover. So those are some of the issues they may have to look at in the acquisition of the permits, because somebody's turnover might not necessarily
reflect the
money
work
they've actually got
accumulated
from petroleum activities, unless they are looking at the contract value of work worth what you've gotten in the petroleum industry to give you the permit rate. Then that will be fine. If we are looking at your general turnover, my general turnover can include everything I've done and then other businesses I have done to reflect in my accounting, and that will not be a fair judgment of using that as a basis for issuing a permit to somebody on that rate.
Now, how would you assess the general petroleum industry in Ghana as you see it? I mean, cutting across the entire value chain, how would you assess it?
I mean, it started on a small scale with the Jubilee partners. Others have joined, and others have joined. More licenses are being issued. So the more blocks are being allocated to people, the more oil companies that are coming, the bigger the market will grow. And we can't compare ourselves to countries like Nigeria or other places. But the little that we have, I think we are maximizing it, and we are growing gradually. If you look at the trends, the industry is growing gradually. So the more blocks that are operated, the more operators that are coming in, the more it will boost up the industry. We may not directly now be able to benefit from the upstream sector because of the sophistication and nature of the business. But the other things that emanates from that sector, like I said, in 2002, when I started writing my institute exams, we didn't have any brokerage houses.
Exactly.
Now we have many of them. So that's a direct benefit. And most other subcontractors have come in simply because of the exploration and production. So the more blocks that are, and once it's in an exploration stage, there's less contracts. If we move on to production stages, the contracts expand. So we should be praying for more oil to be found, for them to get to the production stages. Then it means more contracts will come, which will trickle down to local companies. And then the industry will grow. And all that also depends on the general economy as well. If things are moving on well in the economy, the oil companies also move on with their business.
Have you had contracts with some of the partners in recent times?
Yeah, we fixed a vessel to ENI for 1 year in 2012.
Okay.
Yes. So that's something that we have done.
Okay, that's impressive.
Yeah, so we are moving on. We recently are going on negotiations and others with the others to be able to provide these services.
What about the gas? I mean, do you also bring along vessels, storage vessels for gas? Not oil, aside the oil, the crude oil.
And we have tankers. Gas is also carried by tankers, so they all fall under the tanker group.
Okay. Right.
So if we're doing tanker chartering, that includes tankers for either crude oil, for gas, or for LPG, LNG, all the other byproducts.
What about GNPC? What's your relationship like with GNPC currently?
GNPC originally used to be the regulator until it was moved to Petroleum Commission. Now they are an oil company who are aspiring to also go into exploration themselves. So in that instance, it means that we are also going to provide them with vessels if they need it as charterers. So they are a national oil company that is looking at also producing. They've had joint ventures with other companies. So if the operations are normalized and they need vessels, that's something that we can provide for them. And we also do sale and purchase. So if we were in existence before the sale of the drill ship, we would have sold the drill ship.
Well, that's quite interesting.
Yeah.
Now, do you support nationalization of the industry?
Nationalization is good. And it's not only in Ghana that local content laws are being promoted. If you go to most oil companies, they are promoting local content. Content has to go with capability, capacity, technology transfer. And so it's something that happens over time. It doesn't just take off.
Okay.
It takes a while to train people to be able, I mean, you're dealing with an industry with high expertise.
Okay.
You're dealing with an industry with high risk. And so the person at the other end is also looking at his investment and how well that investment can be maximized for them not to incur extra cost. So nationalization is good by all intent and purposes because it helps build local capacity. It helps build local technology transfer. It helps boost up the local economy itself. So that is something that we need to promote. So if somebody has the skill, the capability, and can do the work, obviously that company should be preferred, and the law should
You don't think it prevents foreign investment further?
It does have its own negative effects.
Okay.
Because, for instance, let me take an instance of the kind of job we do. If you are fixing a vessel to Ghana and it says that local content, so all crew on board, let's assume, is an exemption because it has to be, one, we have what we call flag state regulation in place, and then also the local legislation in place. If, assuming that it says that all crew on board should be Ghanaians, does that mean that if the vessel is coming to work for 3 days here, the owner would have to change all the crew and put on Ghanaian crew for 3 days? Is that something that you consider cost effective? Or is it that the next minute the vessel is in Togo also going to work for 1 week, and Togo says local content, so all crew must be Togolese, and so all the crew on board the vessel should be changed from Ghanaians? So these are some of the negative effects that if you want to go full cabotage, these are the implications that we're going to go through. But it has to be a gradual system. I think the local content law provides the years within which capacity should be built and the takeover should happen. So once it gives a span, by the span, the maximum time that is allocated in the law, then that can happen. By then you would have acquired all the expertise and things. And in such things like crewing, the industry would have to look at regionalization maybe, because if somebody is a Nigerian and somebody is a Ghanaian and somebody is a Togolese, and they are all seafarers, what are we going to do if we said 100% local content?
Well, I would just like to give you a few words. I mean, what is the way forward finally, before we wrap up?
The way forward is that now we have seen that a lot of licenses have been issued and blocks allocated to oil companies who want to drill in the country. So we are looking at an industry that's going to expand over some years to come. And we are looking forward to seeing the Petroleum Commission implement the local content regulations to the latter, and make sure that the principles every industry tries by enforcement. In Ghana, we have beautiful laws in place. We are looking at total enforcement. Once we're able to enforce the laws and get our acts together, then it means we can move forward in terms of localization, in terms of acquiring expertise and all of that. And we're looking at flexible financial support for Ghanaians who want to own vessels. Once the industry expands, it's going to give an opportunity for vessel ownership. We are looking at Ghanaians who can own vessels. And therefore, if Ghanaians own the vessels, then they can be chartered out to the oil companies. So the banks will have to be forthcoming by understanding the industry and look at how best they can support local companies to acquire vessels and own them.
Thank you so much. It's been very, very insightful, very educative, and I'm pleased to be in your office today to learn so much from you, as well as the general public or the viewers. We believe you will find time for us once again and later on when we call your attention to come and explain other issues. Thanks so much for coming on to Black Gold. That has been Mrs. Gertrude Adjoa Ohene Esiniam. She is the country manager of Offshore Shipbrokers, and she appeared on Black Gold. Thanks for your attention. Do join us again same time next week for another interesting package. My name is Emmanuel Abuaji Riafe.